What will it take for Arizona football to have a top 4 defense in the Big 12, and what would that mean?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Check it out, FanDuel.com. Okay, now, Arizona football. We're going to talk about the defense here and why it can be why it should be able to possibly be a top 4 defense. Now, a big part of all of this equation is that I think that you've got a lot of underrated players across the board here. And honestly, a big part of that is that, listen, when you're talking about the defensive backs, listen, you lost Ephesians Prysock. That was obviously a big loss. Oh, by the way, I do apologize. The show is brought to you by FanDuel.com. Check it out, FanDuel. All kinds of really good stuff. Bet on it. You know your money's good. Check it out, FanDuel.com. Okay, now, but listen, you look at the defensive backs, and you lost Ephesians Prysock. He's certainly very, very good. There's no doubt about it. He's at smelly, rainy Seattle, and he's probably going to be he'll probably be an NFL player. But look at the rest of that defensive backfield, though, that Arizona has now. Not only, I think you're going to make the case that they are actually even better this coming year. Now, listen, you got Tacario Davis back, one of the best DBs in the entire country, a guy that is a projected first-round pick on many, many boards. That was a huge, huge thing that Brent Brennan was able to get back, obviously. So you've got him. And then you've also got you got in the nickel, you got Tre Smith. Both those guys should be as good, if not better, this coming year, especially Tacario Davis. I think the big thing with Tacario Davis is continuing to improve, but I think there's every reason to believe that he is going to improve. A very, very good football player is Tacario Davis. Now, with the and then Tre Smith another year, and I think with Duane Akina calling the shots, I think that he's going to be able to put himself in a lot of different positions to make plays. I think that Akina is going to be more aggressive with him. So you got both those dudes. Then, obviously, at the safety spots, you're loaded. You got back Gunnar Maldonado, you got back Dalton Johnson, you got back Genesis Smith. So let's talk about them all. Dalton Johnson, the quarterback of that defense, he is, listen, you just know it when he is not out there. You can just tell that there is a difference when he is not out there. Arizona needs Dalton Johnson on the field as much as possible. And this is another one that I think Jed messed up on with Dalton Johnson. He's always kind of in the right place at the right time. He's setting people up. He's doing a lot of different things. Obviously, a very, very good football player is Dalton Johnson. And then next to him, you got Gunnar Maldonado. My bad, Gunnar. Listen, last year with Gunnar Maldonado, I think there were, you watched for half the season and you're like, what in the world is going on out here? He's getting destroyed on basically every single play. But by the end of the year, you could see what the coaches saw in him, and he was maybe the best player in the Alamo Bowl. He was and throughout the year, just a big-time player. And I think when you watch him, you can just tell that he is at some point he just got it. And from a offensive perspective, from a hitting perspective, from a coverage perspective, he was just different. So you got both those dudes back there at the safety, and you got to think too, especially, both those guys, a year older, a year wiser, also, obviously showing people what they can do. That's a good spot. Genesis Smith, he's the one that I think you're going to probably see take a really, really big jump this coming year. Listen, I think that he's going to be an NFL player. I thought that he was underrated coming out of high school. And not only did I think he's underrated coming out of high school, I think that he is going to be an NFL player. And I think that, I think Duane Akina has essentially said as much. Watching him, he's big, he can hit, he's physical, just a lot of different things that he can do. And you watch him and you're like, all right, that's the dude that gets it. That's a guy that, I think could certainly play that part. We will find out, obviously, how that all does play. But either way, I think you got to feel pretty good about Genesis Smith. Those three safeties, though, man, those are problems, and they all complement each other really well. You got Dalton Johnson, that's kind of the quarterback who can get into the box. Gunnar Maldonado, the big hitter. Genesis Smith, the guy that's probably the best NFL prospect who's still learning, but is always around the ball. All three of those safeties, big time, man. Those guys are all big time football players. And I expect them to even be better with Duane Akina really calling the shots, as Duane Akina is probably the best defensive backs coach in college football history. Then across from, then you also bring in Owen Goss. Listen, I think Owen Goss can be that Martell Irby type. Justin Spears, shout out for that comparison, or a Tremaine Bondurant, in that he's not really a safety, he's not really a linebacker, but he's just a football player, and he's out there making plays. Duane Akina putting him in position to be able to make plays, and him capitalizing on that. I think there's going to be, honestly, I think there's going to be a lot of that with Owen Goss. And I think too, coming from Colgate, you can tell that he is physically, he looks the part. Not only does he look the part, some guys are just around the football, and you get the sense that this dude is always going to be around the football, a very, very good football player, and somebody that I think we should all be excited to watch. And I think that, Duane Akina certainly is going to be happy to be able to work with this. He is, I think, like I said, I think he is going to fit in very well with what Arizona wants to do. So, and then you got Marquise Groves-Killebrew. I believe that he is going to be on the opposite side of Tacario Davis, and I think that he easily makes the most sense as that. At about 6'2", we obviously don't know for a fact what he's going to be able to do, but keep in mind, he was at Georgia. He was then at Texas A&M, or he committed to Georgia, Texas A&M, Louisville, and he was dealing with an injury the entire time. So when he got to Arizona, they found out the guy's got a hernia. So they operated on that, and you watch him in practice, before everything got shut down, and you could just see that this was a player that the coaching staff, I think, has very high expectations for. He is somebody that I think has next level potential. Obviously, you have to see it during games, but so far so good. And again, that's really all you can go by, is what you see out there during that time. And I think he has been he's been very, very impressive for the U of A. We'll find out more about where that's all at, but that is a loaded defensive backfield. And then you got Emmanuel Carnley, who I don't know that he's going to play this year, but there's going to be a stage coming up here where he is going to be a big-time football player for the U of A. I think that's probably next year, but he gives you some depth as well. And then, obviously, you've also got to talk about, so that's kind of what you're looking at right there with those players. I don't know that I really expect much out of Demetrius Freeney. I would love to be wrong on that. I just haven't really seen it. But listen, when you got 6-7 DBs that are all really, really good, you can do a lot of things, and I expect them, and we're going to talk about that in the next segment, but I think that you're going to see Duane Akina put a lot of those different guys in the box and do a lot of different things. I think that this is going to be a very aggressive defense, and I think that's something that's going to be very, very good for Arizona football. It's going to be interesting to see how this all does play out, but so far so good, and watching this squad, I think the defensive backs are probably the best in the Big 12 if you just look at that entire unit and you just go position by position what they can all do. Now, let's talk about FanDuel. Here's the deal with FanDuel. You might be watching the Big 12 this year. You got Big 12 games coming up, and you're like, man, I'd love to bet on a game. Absolutely, as you should. Check it out, though, with FanDuel.com. All kinds of really good stuff going on at FanDuel. I think the thing that is great about it with FanDuel is that your money is good. You can bet on things, and not only bet on things, but that, listen, I can bet on something, and guess what? My money's good, and I can bet before the game, during the game, or I can bet futures. Check it out, though. FanDuel.com, another one of these ones where you will thank me later on it because, again, football is here. Basketball is right around the corner. You got the two best sports, and guess what? You can bet on them as well, and you can bet on them knowing your money is good. Check it out, FanDuel.com. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the linebacker position. Now, linebacker is interesting here because obviously you don't have nearly the depth that you do at the defensive back and the defensive backfield, but there is still a lot to like about this their linebacker unit. And I think the big one, and I think a huge part of it is that I think the first one is you've got a guy in, you've definitely got a guy in Jacob Manu, who's about as good a linebacker as there is in the country. And if he's not the best linebacker in the country, he's certainly in that top 5 or 6. If you were to tell me that he was going to be the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, I don't think that anybody would be at all surprised by that. I think that is definitely I think that could definitely be a possibility for the U of A. But he's going to be essentially everywhere. And when I say that he is going to be essentially everywhere, I mean that he is going to be everywhere on the football field. He is going to be attacking the quarterback. He is going to be looking to plug the run. Not only is he going to be looking to plug the run, he's also going to he's just going to be all over the place. Last year, 6 sacks. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he had even more than that this coming year, because I think, like I said, Duane Akina has stated that he wants to have a more aggressive defense. And I think if you've got a more aggressive defense, that's that's a big part of what I think Arizona wants to do. We will find that one out, obviously, but I'd look for a season where I think he's going to have 130 tackles, 7 sacks. I think that he is just primed and ready to go. And again, you've got a defensive coordinator that is going to look to get him involved in, as much as possible in the pass rush. And I think that's going to be the case. Then next to him, though, it's going to be interesting because you got a lot of different options from Tay Brown, who, I think is going to be a good football player here, but I think it's going to continue to take him a little bit of time. He's got a good build, but again, a good football player. And I think with Kamu, he's the one that I think you talk with some coaches, and he is. I think he's going to be a difference maker. Not only a difference maker, he's going to be a player that I think is probably a year off, but at this stage, he might get onto the field as well. He's had some monster practices. He's been out for a little bit, but you can also tell big, strong, physical, instinctive, a lot to like with him. And again, a player that I think this coaching staff clearly believes can be a next level difference maker for them. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do, because honestly, I think there's a lot to like about his capabilities. I just don't know that it's necessarily going to be this year, but I also don't know that it's not going to be this year. How about that for covering my bets? But he is. So you got those two dudes and Leviticus Sua. We've got to be able to Leviticus Sua. We got to give a lot of credit to. He has been a player that has been very, very good in the last couple of days in practice. And not only has he been very good in practice, he has been the player that I think a lot of people were hoping will be that guy. We will find out, and but overall, he's been much better. And I think with what really works with him, though, is that he's a bigger guy. Not only is he a bigger guy, he's a player that he gets into the huddle, and he understands football. Things just kind of come a little bit slower, I think, on the movement side for him. We'll see how that one does play out. But overall, I think this is a unit that's going to be very, very good, and I'm excited to see exactly how this does all play out. But you're also going to see a ton of different safeties, a ton of different linebackers in the mix, and I think that's going to be an interesting part of this. Genesis Smith, like we talked about, he's going to be a de facto linebacker at times, and I'm not sure why he wouldn't be a de facto linebacker. It's 6'3", 225 or 220. He's got very much of that bigger safety, that Roy Williams type look, where you can really just kind of mess some people up and get in the backfield and make some plays. That's going to be an exciting thing to be able to watch from this coaching staff. Then Owen Goss, like we talked about, kind of that Martell Irby role where not necessarily a safety, not necessarily a linebacker, but a dude that can, I think, probably get in there and be able to kind of, mix things up as well. I'm excited to see all of those guys. And honestly, Dalton Johnson, Gunnar Maldonado, and Tre Smith, he's going to be a dude blitzing off the edge at times. They're going to be able to find a lot of different ways to make this work. And I think with Duane Akina, that's what's exciting about him is that he said from day one, I want to be able to get my best football players on the field. It's on me to be able to get my best football players on the field. And I think he's going to be able to do it. Listen, with the Big 12, a big part of this is you've got running games that are going to try to run the ball right at you, from Ollie Gordon to Neal to Giddens to you name it. You got a lot of different teams that are players that can really run the football. It's going to be up to Arizona and this linebacking / safety unit to be able to make some plays, and we will see how all of that does play out. But I think Jacob Manu is your one proven linebacker, and I have no doubt that Duane Akina is going to be able to make some other things work for the rest of this linebacking unit. Now, the defensive line, here's where it gets interesting for me because you need players that are going to be impact guys, and you got some question marks. For sure. But it starts with Tre Smith for me. Tre Smith, I think, has got to be in that 8-sack realm, but not only in that 8-sack realm, just kind of around everything and getting after the quarterback, getting after consistently in the backfield, and a dude that is a guy who is basically able to, like I said, get after the quarterback and, consistently apply pressure. At San Jose State, he was able to do that. 6.5 sacks. We talked about it. A lot of tackles for loss, a lot of different things. But the next step then is being able to, I think, make that the next one is to be able to make that, transfer that to the Pac-12. Now, again, in practice, he's been fantastic. He's looked every bit the part of, I think, what you're looking for from a young man like that. Can he transfer that? And I think that's going to be the interesting part. I believe he's going to be able to transfer it. I think that he's going to I think that Arizona is going to be in very, very good shape when it comes to Tre Smith. But you also got to see it on the football field. That's a big part of all of this. You got to be able to see it on the football field first. And then if it happens, then you're obviously in really good shape. Then you got Tai Uiagalelei. I think Tai is going to break out. I don't think that I'm really breaking any news, but Tai is a relentless football player. He comes after you. And not only does he come after you, he is he was just meant to play football. I think the next step for him is being able to really be consistent. I know the coaching staff loves him. You got Tre Smith and you got Tai on opposite sides. Good stuff from both of them. And getting after the quarterback, that's going to be something that's going to be very interesting to watch. But there's going to be a lot of expectations on those two young men because you got to be able to get to the quarterback. And last year, I think that the one thing about it was between Taylor Upshaw and between Deuce Davis and Isaiah Ward on the other side, 16 sacks between those two DNs. I don't necessarily need, or those three DNs. I don't necessarily need 16 sacks between these two, but I need something like where they're combining for about 12, 13, and I can deal with the rest. The players off the edge obviously concern me a little bit. I think Kennelly might be able to help a little bit, the Stanford player. The problem with Chase Kennedy is he's just way too light. I mean, he's about 210, 212 pounds. I didn't see him. I didn't think that he was going to be that light, but the depth behind does worry me a little bit, but Akina is going to be able to bring players. He's going to be able to have a multitude of different angles, so we will see how that does play out. Now, when it comes to we're going to talk about the defensive tackles next, but first, Game Time. Check it out. All kinds of really good stuff at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Check it out. The great thing about Game Time is this, is that you can bet on a game before a game, or excuse me, not Game Time. The great thing about Game Time is you can get into pretty much anything you want, from a concert to a game, and they're going to get you the best prices. They're going to get you the lowest ticket prices guaranteed. Again, download the Game Time app. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Like I said, it's good stuff. It's good stuff here with Game Time. And I know somebody that got into the Alamo Bowl last second by using Gametime. So again, check it out. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the defensive, the defensive tackles. Chuba May. I need Chuba May to be a run stopper. If he's a run stopper, then Arizona is going to do very, very well. I think he's just got to be able to stay healthy. He's a monster of a man. He's 6'2", 350 pounds. He is just huge. And then next to him, obviously, Isaiah Johnson. Those guys got to be able to step up. They got to be able to, really clog the run. If they can clog the run, then it allows Duane Akina to be able to be a lot more versatile when it comes to his blitz packages, knowing that he's got two players there that can stuff the run. But like we talked about, Akina wants to get upfield. He wants to get after the quarterback. He doesn't want to hold blocks or hold tackles. And I think that's also where somebody like Kevon Darton is going to come into play. The Syracuse transfer. I think with Kevon Darton, you're hoping that he can replicate some of that impact that he had at Syracuse last year. I mean, again, we talked about 5 sacks, 8.5 for loss, 40 plus tackles. Just a really, really good football player, but a little bit undersized. He appears very undersized up close, but sometimes, like we talked about with Akina, he wants to be able to get after the quarterback. Then Bear Anderson, the same thing with Bear Anderson. He's a really, really good football player. But he's also young. He's also about 270 pounds. I think the problem with him is that, again, he's just young. He's going to get snaps this year. I think his time is going to be next year, and then we'll see how it plays out. But overall, I think their pieces are there for this to be a top 4 defensive unit. I think that, listen, there's there's obviously question marks, but this isn't the year where you're going in and you're saying, man, there's going to be no answers. That's not going to be the case here. And not only is it not going to be the case, I think it's going to be something where you've got his coaching staff that, wants to be really put the pressure on the opposition. And I think that's what you're going to see. We'll see how it all plays out. But from a loaded defensive backfield to, a linebacker that's amongst the very best in the country to a defensive line that's got a lot of potential, it's just going to be interesting to see what that next level is for them. There's a lot to work with here. And I think Duane Akina knows that. So we will find out. But listen, you give that man the best, a loaded defensive backfield, and I think you're probably going to see a staff. I think you're probably going to see a bunch of different people that are able to get after the quarterback and, like I said, and make things happen. So we'll see. But again, if it's a top 4 defense in the Big 12, I think you are looking squarely at a college football playoff, because I think that the offense, I have very little doubt outside of, Rhino not being good at left tackle, that this offense is going to be good, that this offense is going to be stellar. So we will certainly see how that all plays out. But like I said, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. We're a little over 2 weeks out from the home opener. That is going to be a very, very fun time, and I think we are all excited about that. We're going to talk next week more about it. We're going to talk about basketball as well, but we got a lot to get to. But like I said, on that note, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down, back the A. We'll be back with you tomorrow.